This is Slam, Music Survival Guide 31. We've got David Rock Feinstein of The Rods and formerly of Elf with his cousin, Ronnie James Dio. Quote from this episode: I had to call Ronnie back and say, Ronnie, as much as it breaks my heart, keep listening, find out the rest of that story. Wild dogs, they terrorize the night. What's up, everyone? Jack Mangan here from Support Life and
Well, the one of them's here anyways.
Right, we got one wild dog.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a mild dog over here, but
yeah. Don't know how
got
wild.
Support Life music.
The wildness might have dimmed down a little bit, with the years that have gone by. But now the new album is called like Wild Dogs Unchained. So they're actually finally free, because all through the years we've used that moniker, like wild dogs, and they're always in cages and they're always chained up and they're always tied up. And it's like, okay, finally, like after all this time, they're unchained. They're free to do whatever they want to do. So I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, so we got David Rock Feinstein from The Rods. This guy's a long history, but that's what we're here to talk about. The Rods are a powerhouse in yeah. So we're talking about the new album. So I mean, yeah, let's jump right into it. Yeah, so I mean, this is a cool concept you guys are doing where it's new and old, but and unchained. Thanks for giving some insight there.
Yeah. The new album, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I don't know if you have any specific questions about it, but when the band changed bass players, when Gary left the band, like probably now, the way time goes by, 3 or 4 years ago, and Carl and and Gary had been with the band for a long time, through a lot of albums. And, he was an integral part of the band, both live and recording. So at that point in time, Carl and I had to pretty much decide, do we just like end it now? I mean, Gary's leaving the band. We're a three-piece band, so it's like, is Gary leaving the band? What do we do? Do we continue on? Or do we try to restructure the band? Restructuring the band was not a good idea for me and for Carl after, because we had built up this, following of being a three-piece trio, basically the American Motorhead is what we were called. And, to structure the band into something different would be a mistake, So, but we did decide to go on, and we, Freddie Volano, who is an incredible bass player, he's our new bass player in the band, and actually lives locally now. He only lives probably 20 miles from where I live. He came in and we were good friends, and he came in and he wanted to be the bass player and we wanted to have him, and he ended up being our new bass player. So we decided to carry on. So since then we did the two previous albums. And for me, as basically the writer, of mostly all the material. I mean, the early days, Carl wrote a lot and also, threw in a lot of different ideas. But for me as the writer, I don't know if I could say that like maybe the Rods have matured, because back in the day, it was basically, in the 80s, you wrote songs about, partying and girls and, like the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll type of thing. When I was, playing with Ronnie, which was, that was the early years of Ronnie Dio and the Prophets and the Electric Elves and the Elves and then Elf, it's like, as a co-writer or writer in that era, with Ronnie's talents, you could write anything and he could sing it, like world class. So, as a writer, you were, it was limitless, in that respect, as far as material went. Being a three-piece band with, myself as the singer, which is, I'm not really, I never really wanted to be the singer in the band. We wanted to get a singer in the beginning, and there was nobody around to sing. And actually, we all took part in singing in the beginning. Carl sang some lead, and our original bass player sang some lead, and I sang some lead, and kind of just like stayed that way. And I became eventually the main singer in the band. So in writing and creating the concept of the band at that time, I had to write songs that I couldn't write a song that I knew that Ronnie was going to sing. I had to write a song that fit what we were doing as a power trio, and something that we could put across maybe live with me singing it, or me and Gary singing it. So
Sure.
kind of like limited things as far as the writing goes. Now, when Ronnie passed away, it kind of like had a big impact on me, and because even though we didn't play together for a long time, we saw a lot of each other, especially the last 10 years of his life. And his writing abilities and his mind, his lyrics always had a meaning. They always meant something that was real, and I decided at that time that I wanted to do that. I wanted to write. If I'm going to write music, I'm going to write songs, I want to write something that means something, that has some kind of meaning that other people can relate to, other than what time's the party start, that kind of thing. So this last album, we were under a lot of pressure, from the record label, because we had to get it done by a certain time, even though that was, you know, didn't work out because the label prolonged things. They had problems, so it really never. Our rush to get everything done was really for nothing. But anyways, I
Mm.
was the pressure of like, okay, geez, well, I got to write 10 songs now, just so we got to get this album. And that's not something you do overnight, even though I'm always constantly having ideas for songs, titles, and whatnot. But things at that time, because I wanted to write things that were going on about things that are going on in the world that people can relate to, and that's where, when you hear some of the songs on this album, even though there's a couple of good basic rock and roll songs on the album, the newer songs like "World on Fire," "Tears for the Innocent," those type of songs were inspired me to write those songs, which was going on in the world. Like Tears for the Innocent, or like, people dying, people getting killed, losing their homes and everything because of bombing. That they, you all of a sudden your house is bombed and you're going and you're losing everything. If you're not dead, you don't have anything. And it affected me as to like what was going on in the world. So like I know those two songs were being big inspiration for me. So they needed to be put down, and in a way that I could put lyrics in there so that people would understand, and kind of know how I felt about what was going on, rather than just basic rock and roll stuff. Um, Whether that's going to fly or not, I don't. Fans will listen to it. They would say, I don't care about it. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter to me, because I've expressed myself through those, three or four songs that are on the album, that relate to that kind of thing. If
Mhm.
people agree with it, fine. If they don't agree with it, that's fine too. And I mean, everybody just liked what they like, and that's fine. But I got to express myself, which in turn, made the rods look a lot different, as far as what uh, people were used to listening to Rod's albums. And they put this new album out, and there's quite a bit of keyboards in some of the songs, because I always felt that, even through the years, I felt that some of the songs I wrote, I wanted to put keyboards in, but because we were a trio, I knew we could never, put them off live, and we'd have to, get a keyboard player and the whole thing. But
Mm.
I felt that some of these songs really needed to be orchestrated, with a keyboard, and that's why some of them are like that. So I hope that when people listen to this, that they hear those particular songs, and they will be able to tell what songs they are by listening to them. That they like it, and they understand like where I'm coming from as far as a writer, and what I want to put across, and what my feelings are about basically things that are going on in the world today.
Yeah, that's great.
Which is
Yeah,
really
well,
crap, So
sure. Yeah, but I know also throughout the album, I mean, throughout a lot of your career, like there's a lot of positivity too. I wanted to comment on that, because that's actually a lot of what Support Life and Music is about. So I really like Eyes of a Dreamer is kind of a very positive song. I think people can be
that
inspired. It's inspiring.
that's another one that fits into that category, so, I mean, a lot of these songs because Ronnie and I were so close, and I knew that his lyrics and where he was at as far as, his feelings and everything, he wanted the same thing, he wanted to write lyrics that people could relate to, you know, and he just had he was a brilliant mind, brilliant, singer, brilliant everything. I mean, I can't even come close to the capabilities or the ingenuity that he had, but I wanted to follow that route and try to make something better than just a rock and roll song, So that's what's inspired me about that, to be positive about what's going on. There's so much negativity in the world today that, why should you write about something else that's negative, So that's just where I'm at as far as the writing. So about by me writing those songs and putting them into the rods, it makes the band, different, and and Carl and Freddie are really, into that, they're happy, they like the songs. Um, when I played when I finished writing World on Fire and I played it for Carl, he goes, "Oh my God, this is the best song you ever wrote in your life," and it's like, oh, because it's different, because I never wrote a song like that for the rods, but
Mhm.
I felt that we needed to do that, and Freddie, added a lot to the band as a bass player, as a musician, as a person. He's a great person. He's a great guy to get along with, and he has a lot of ideas. And he's a little bit younger than Carl and I, so his ideas and things, like are nice to listen to because it's coming from basically like another generation, you know. So we still want to keep our identity. We'll still, if we play live shows, we'll still come out and kick ass like we normally do. It'll still be the same thing. But it's going to be, this album is just a little bit more serious, I think, than previous ones.
Yeah, I see that. But I also say it still feels like a Rod's album. You guys didn't reinvent yourself, but it's like you said, maturity, it's growth. But yeah, I appreciate that it still sounds like the Rods, still feels like the Rods. But I definitely get what you're saying. And the positivity again, it's a great
Yeah.
thing. The messages on this album, I think
Hmm.
pretty much anyone can get behind, no matter where they
Yeah.
fall.
Hmm.
Um, so I watched. Actually, I wanted to talk about did a great interview last year or 2 years ago with Joey DeMaio, one of your friends in the industry. So I loved you guys talked about, kind of the challenges of this job. People don't really think about it. People think like, oh, it's just an easy, cushy job. But there's a lot of challenges to the touring, or the
Yeah.
life of a professional musician. Talk to us a little bit about what it means, what it means to be in this job. What are the challenges that you face, and going on tour and every other part of it.
Well, the thing is, like, the actual 40 minutes, 45 minutes, hour, however long you're on stage playing is the actual drug that we are hooked on, the actual playing, because when you're on stage playing, it makes you feel good because you're playing, but it also makes, when you see the reaction of the crowd and how they feel, you're making them feel good too, because they're into it, and it's just an incredible feeling, to be able to do that. What you're talking about is like hours of rehearsal, hours of preparation, especially, with sound systems and sound check and lighting and crew and equipment and travel arrangements, how to get there and back and how we're going to do everything. So it's more than just like, um, I think a lot of, and really the fans don't need to be bothered by that. They're there, they're paying their ticket price, they're coming to see the show. It's not their problem, what it took us to get there. It's our work, it's what we love to do. And it's part of the whole thing, being on the stage is basically a very small part of what it takes to really put you on that stage for the hour or hour and a half or whatever it is, because of all the logistics they have to be taken into consideration. Flights, arrangements, hotels. Where are you going to eat? What are we going to eat? How are we going to get there? What equipment are we using? Is it the right stuff? So there's all kinds of things not to mention, the rehearsal time that has to go in to the actual performance. So yeah, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. But like I said, it's not the fans' problem. They're there to see the band. The band wants to do the best that they can to make the fans happy. And it makes us feel good to do that.
All right. Well, no, that's a great answer, and I appreciate it. Well, I mean, I'm going to say one more thing about the frustration, then we'll get back to a little more fun stuff. But so you actually alluded to it earlier, like dealing with sometimes you deal with, I mean, anybody's boss. The boss says the deadline's right away. That's what you guys had. Get this
Yeah.
album out right away. Oh, hang on.
Yeah.
So
It's always like, we need it tomorrow, but then it sits on a desk for 6 months. That's something that, personally we've experienced, and everybody else probably has too, for years. you know um the thing is, because today's a different world, back in the day, all the bands, artists, whatever, were really, it was important, it was necessary that you had a record label. You were signed to a label, and an agency, because there was no internet. You needed a record company to put their record out. In today's world, because of the internet, you can record, you can put your music out there and do things like that. But um, the hard part was in the early days, when you really needed to have, a record label or somebody behind you. And I've kind of like gotten off the subject. I kind of like forgot about actually what your real question was. But what was that? There was a point that you were trying to make.
I like where you're going with this. So where the difference between the past and
Yeah.
the present, what you need. I was just talking about the frustrations, of dealing with sometimes with record label
Oh,
bosses and that
yeah.
kind of thing. But yeah,
Yeah, we need it. Yeah. Well, that's, it seems like it happens all the time. We need it tomorrow. We need it tomorrow. We need it tomorrow. And it's like, then when you bust your ass to get it done in time, then it sits on someone's desk for, months. It's kind of like, okay, but the reality of it is that there's nothing you could do about it, because like I said, back in the day, you were at the mercy of, those people. Well, whether it was record label, management, agency, whatever, people are handling these. It's like, and I've been told, many years ago, that the music business is two words: it's music and it's business. So we're the music part. We're the ones that are creating what's being sold. The people that are in the business side of it are the people that are actually, like, handling the business part of it. And a lot of times the musicians, especially back in the day, were on the bottom end of the totem pole is when it comes time to get paid. And the thing is, at the in the beginning, and even I can say for us, it's never really been about, well, we want to be stars, we want to go, we want to be millionaires. It's like in the Elf band, you know, we didn't think about, we didn't grow our hair long because it was a cool thing. We didn't grow our hair long because playing in a band because we wanted to be superstars and be rich, and that whole thing. We did it because, for the love of doing it, we wanted to do it. And that's basically the way the Rods have always been too. In fact, when the Rods started, it was like, you probably know the story. When I left the Elf band for a while, I never really planned on leaving for a long time. I only needed a few months off. But during that time, the band moved to California, and we had already had a very close association with Deep Purple and all the guys in that band. And because Roger and Ian, produced the Elf album, and even before I left the band, we toured extensively with Deep Purple. So when the band left, when I realized that Ronnie, and Richie were forming Rainbow, I figured, well, there's never me going back to Elf, because there is no more Elf. There's only the Rainbow. The question that will never be answered, it can't be answered, is if I had not needed a few months away from the business, because it's all I had done since I was 13 years old. If I had gone to California at the time, and if the Elf band stayed together, would Ronnie have made the decision to say, hey, we're just going to do our own thing. We're going to stay with the Elf Band. We're having some success and stuff. He might have, not gone in the rainbow, movement. And the thing that I couldn't figure out when it all happened is the fact that, and Deep Purple, I idolized that band, and I idolized, Richie Blackmore. He was one of the guys that really inspired me, playing guitar. Why does someone quit the band that's in a band that's the biggest band in the world? Because, Deep Purple was probably the biggest band in the world at the time. I mean, playing arenas with that band, Why does somebody quit? It's always a question. It's just like David Lee Roth and Van Halen, biggest band in the world. Why do you leave? But anyways, those are questions that will never be answered. But anyways, I knew at the time, for me, because Richie took the whole Elf band, as his band to start Rainbow, and me being the guitar player, I certainly wouldn't be in the band. It would be Richie. So anyways, after a while, I decided, I needed to do something, and music is not something, when you're a musician, it's not something that ever leaves you, I think, it's always with you, no matter what you do, no matter how much time you take off. And I started writing songs, and I started wanting to play again. And I said, I got to form a band and just to play some bars around town to make some money, make $50 a night, and fun. And that's when I looked around. I went and saw the band Carl was playing in. He's a great drummer. I said, hey, you want to start a band? Yeah, we started a band. And, we went through, actually, I think Freddie's the third or fourth bass player. But that's originally what the band was started, just to be a club band and make a few bucks. It wasn't like, let's start a band and make records and tour the world. But what happened was, I started writing songs. Carl wrote some songs. We recorded them on our own. We got the guy came to see us play. He wanted to be our manager. All of a sudden we got a manager. Now we got a record deal, and all of a sudden we're in Europe, on tour with Iron Maiden. Which was like, it's kind of a fluke. It's like, it's not what we intended the band to be. And then so it just, like, all the years that go by, and the albums that were done in different ways. And then finally, the band decides we just got to give it up for a while. When we took a hiatus or whatever, it wasn't a bitter one. It was one we just needed to get away from it for a while, until we had the reunion. But that's basically, how the Rods, the history of the Rods were and is, until we had this reunion, probably, well, I'm going to guess now, because the years go by so fast, 15 years ago, I started doing solo albums, and Carl I got a phone call. I hadn't seen Carl and Gary in a while, and I got a phone call from Carl, and he said, I just heard your latest solo album. It really makes me want to play, So we decided to do a couple of reunion shows, one in my hometown and one in where Gary lived in Ithaca, which is only like 20 miles from here. And they were small clubs, maybe held 100 people. We did those shows, and people came out of the walls, and now there was internet. Before there wasn't. So people knew the Rods are back out playing. So all of a sudden, we're getting phone calls from, like, Spain, like Brazil, and they're calling saying, like, what do we got to give you to come play our festival, And we were just so happy because of the internet, we never realized that we had fans in these countries, So we would say, hey, plane tickets, hotel, food, transportation, and some equipment for the stage, and we're there. 99.9% of all the shows that we've done in the last 15 years have been break-even shows. Once in a while, we would ask for a performance fee, but other than that, we've done it for the love of doing it, and because we've done it in countries that we had never been in our heyday, and got to play for fans that fans say, I've been waiting like 20 years to hear you play, and now finally I'm getting to hear you play live. So that's where we're at right now. We're thinking that, like, we're chomping at the bit to get out and play again, because we turned down any offer we had for last year because there was an urgency to get this album done, which was useless, you know. So we're that um, because of this new album, it will spur some new interest in, you know, promoters and, you know, concert promoters and people that might want to see the band so that we can get out and play live, you know, some more live shows. That's what we're looking forward to doing. And that's about it. That's where we stand right now.
Headbangers, how are you? I'm super. Thanks for asking. Mike Gobby's Headbangers. Listen to me on 94.9 and 104.5, The Pick, at pickidaho.com. Yeah, I'm in Arizona, and it broadcasts out of Idaho Falls, Idaho. Idaho, Udaho, out of pimp. But you can stream it and tap that app, pickidaho.com. And don't forget about Slam. Da-da-da. Da-da-da, let the boys be boys. No, not that Slam. That's a hip-hop song. Yes, I know hip-hop. So, anyway, yes, support Slam.
Yeah, I'd love to see a Rod's tour, you know, Southwest, North America. That'd be amazing. I mean, man, you have so many great stories to tell. This is fantastic. You got a couple more minutes? Are you all right on time? You got a...
I'm fine. I have all the time in the world.
All right.
You know, good.
Clear the rest of the day then. We're gonna... No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. No, the thing is, I get carried away because, you know, I sometimes get criticized. Not, you know, to criticize, but, you know, for talking too much. But you're right. I have a million stories from the beginning to the end. And I sometimes do get carried away, but I feel good about talking about, I feel good talking about these things to people that want to hear them, you know? If it was somebody that wasn't interested, I certainly wouldn't stand there and rattle off, you know, a bunch of history. We don't care about that crap, you know. But people that want to hear it, you know, I'm happy to tell it. There's a lot to tell, you know, and there's just not enough time to tell it all. So maybe I can tell a lot of it in bits and pieces.
No, again, yeah, don't reel it in. This is a great rock history. I got a couple more, and actually I got a couple from my buddy Rich Catino over at Mental Asylum. Actually, I'll ask one of Rich's question. So, well, actually, you kind of talked a little bit about this, but I'm going to ask his question anyway. I think you can maybe elaborate. His question is, were there any opportunities that your cousin Ronnie Dio, of course, provided you either directly or indirectly?
Opportunities after the Rainbow Sabbath type of thing, you mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He asked me to join Dio back in, I think it was 92 or 93. And he was going to, Tracy G was leaving the band for whatever reason. I mean, it seemed Ronnie went through a lot of different players, especially guitar players. Tracy G was leaving the band, so Ronnie had called me and he was restructuring the band again, and he asked me if he was going to put two guitar players in the band. He was going to ask Craig Goley to come back, and he wanted me to come back as the second guitar player. And, you know, I originally, I just jumped there on the phone and said, yeah, you know, I'd love to do that. You know, it was really a dream come true, you know, because it was like, almost like this is going to be full circle now, you know, and the fact that like, you know, Ronnie and I had such a brotherhood together. I mean, it was just and there was some kind of electricity between the two of us when no matter what room we were in, and maybe it's because we almost died together. But and the fact that Craig Goley to me is and was the Dio guitar player to me. It's my favorite. You know, he was, and not only that, he's a great guy. You know,
He is,
and
yeah, he's super nice, yeah.
this was something that like I really, oh my God, yeah, no, you know, yeah. So yeah, I got off the phone, I'm thinking about it, you know, and it's like, holy shit, I need to go in 2 weeks for a 4-week rehearsal to LA, and then they're going on tour for 6 weeks in Europe. And it's like, I can't do that. You know, I had at that point in my life, I had so many other responsibilities. You know, I had two young children. My wife, their mother was like 100% behind me. You know, no, she never stopped me from, you know, this is what you do and this is what you want to do. But I felt like I can't do this. I really do. I really can't take this time right now. I have too much responsibility to just take off and go. So I had to call Ronnie back and said, you know, Ronnie, as much as it breaks my heart, and it really did, and I still think about it today after all these years, that I can't do this. You know, I really can't, and as much as I'd love to. But we were fortunate, and that was an opportunity. So you know, that would have been great, you know, to be on stage with him again. So the last 10 years of his life, you know, we got to see a lot of each other, you know. I mean, I was going to California, staying at his house, and at that time, his parents were still living here in our hometown, and they were both getting ill at different times. So he was making frequent trips back home here in between. You know, he always had a very tight touring schedule. So when I would go out there, you know, we talked about right from the beginning about doing an Elf reunion type of album, you know, where he would get back on playing bass on the album. Because originally he was the bass player in Elf. He would play bass on the album and sing on the album. So when I went out to visit him, you know, I'd stay for a week, and we would go down into the basement, and we had a little studio there, and we'd work on songs and work on material and kind of work on it. And then it was like, you know, okay, then I got to go home, and I'm 3,000 miles away, and he's got to go on tour for 6 weeks. I got, you know, so we each had responsibilities. So it wasn't coming together very quickly, but every time we got together, we talked about it and planned it. So it was about, I want to say 3 years, maybe 4 years before he passed away. He said, "Hey, I'm coming up. I could sing," you know, and the Rods were still doing records. He said, "I could sing a song on one of your solo records, or I can sing a song on one of the Rods records while I'm up there." And I said, "That would be great. You know, that would be great." So um, there were songs like, I wrote the song "Metal Will Never Die" like years before he passed away. And a lot of people thought that I wrote that song because you know, the fact that he passed away, but that's not the case. That song was written ahead of time, and it was a song that I felt that the Rods weren't really capable of doing the song justice. And actually, right around the same time, Carl had written a song called "The Code," which was definitely not a Rod song. So when Ronnie said he would sing a couple songs, I said to Carl, I said, those two songs are songs that, you know, Ronnie's a great singer, you know, he could do those songs justice. Those two songs would be right for him to sing, you know. And so one of the times when Ronnie was about to come up here, he called and said, "I'm going to be here for an extra day." He said, I could sing a couple songs." I said, "Oh, that's great." So I remember I picked him up at the airport, and we went out, and, you know, and I had a cassette tape that I did with a, you know, scratch vocal track that I did with the rough tracks of the songs, the two songs. And I gave Ronnie a boombox that night, and the cassette tape. And I said, when you go back to the hotel tonight, you know, after drinking a few beers, you know, you can at least listen to the songs, you know, get an idea what they're about, so that when you come in tomorrow to record them, you know, you'll have like an idea, you know, what they are. So the next day comes, and he comes here to the studio, and brings the boombox and the tape. And I said, "Did you listen to the songs?" And he said, "No." I said, "You didn't listen to them?" And he goes, "No." I said, I was tired when I got home back to the hotel, and I just didn't feel like listening to them." I said, "Okay, fine. Okay." You know, well, the thing is, I wasn't really worried, because I had seen Ronnie before, how he records, and how he, you know, I knew what his talents were. So he took the boombox into the vocal booth, and we started with one song. And in the vocal booth, he'd hit the cassette player, and he'd listen to like the first verse of that song, right? And then he goes, "Okay, let's do a take." And he does a take, and it's like spot on. I mean, it's like, it wasn't a copy of my, you know, rough verse. It was him doing it in his own style, in his own way, that he created just from listening to it once. on the boombox, and it was like world class. It was unbelievable, and
Yeah, he was
that's
a pretty good singer. He was a pretty good singer.
that's the way that's the way he did, that was one of his incredible talents, and that's the way he recorded both songs. I mean, it was unbelievable. So I told Carl, before this whole thing happened with him recording, I said, I know, Carl, you've produced a lot of other bands, you've seen a lot of other singers, where I'll do another take, you were a little off on this, you're a little flat on it, another take, another take, another take. That's not Ronnie. I said, you're not going to believe it when you see it, right? Well, Carl, I think at first he said, he kind of like, yeah, I shrugged it off, that kind of thing. But afterwards, when he saw the way Ronnie worked, he said, Rock, when you told me that, he goes, I really didn't think much of it, but honest to God, I've never seen anybody work like that. He did. If Ronnie wanted to do another take, it would be his choice to do another take because he might want to try something different, but every take he did was acceptable, and that's just the way he was, and that's the way I always remember him. Any recording I was involved in with him, that's the way it was. He just had a talent that I've never seen anybody else have. It's just an incredible thing. So anyways, those songs got recorded, and then, it was a couple of years that went by, actually, and then he ends up passing away, and Metal Will Never Die comes out. And I think Metal Will Never Die was on my solo album, and then The Code was on one of the Rod's albums, and that was it. But yeah, the Elf reunion album obviously never happened because him getting sick, and but I really feel fortunate that I got to spend the last 10 years, with, seeing a lot of him, and we got to spend a lot of time together, and we had a lot of laughs. Ronnie was a really funny guy. Actually ran in the family because all of his uncles and everything were jokesters, and they all made all of us laugh. But we had a great time, and I always had a great time when I went to visit him in LA. So I miss him, I really do. After all these years, I listen to like his music, and tears will still come to my eyes when I listen to this stuff, because it's just sad, that he's gone at such an early time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I know it's been a while, but I'm sorry for your loss, man. It's someone in your family. Like I'm heartbroken of it as a fan who played this tapes, like to wore out his tapes. But I mean, it's for you, it's a deeper connection. So yeah, I appreciate all of that, man. It's incredibly powerful.
It's, there's always been some kind of, I don't know what, it's hard to explain. There's always been some kind of like magnetism between Ronnie and I, no matter where we were, no matter what room it was in. And I always thought, well, maybe it's because, like back in the day when we were playing clubs, we were on our way back from Connecticut after playing a week, and a drunk driver ran into us. We were all riding in a van. And the other guitar player in the band at the time, because I was the second guitar player at that time, rhythm guitar player, he was killed in the accident, and we were all hurt really bad. I mean, Ronnie hit the windshield, and he had over 100 stitches in his head. His whole scalp was torn bad. I had a broken ankle. I got here in the mouth. I had stitches, and we actually woke up next to each other in the hospital in Winstead, Connecticut, and we found out that Nicky, the other guitar player, had died. And then of course we both break into tears and the whole thing, and I remember, being in that hospital bed, and Ronnie and I looking it over to each other and saying, "Are we going to put this thing back together?" And we just said yes, and we both looked like zombies. Ronnie's head was shaved. He had all these stitches in his head, and my face was blown up and black and blue, and the whole thing. So we were in the hospital for a week. We came back to Cortland, and we basically, over a period of time, reformed the band. And that's what became the original Elf band after that. So I always thought that maybe, that had something to do with magnetism that was there between the two of us, but I think it was there before that anyways. See, Ronnie, when I got in the band, all the guys in the band were 5 years older than me. So it was much, I was like the baby of the band, when I got in there. So it was a very learning experience for me to be around these guys that were older, to see what it was all about. It's not something that you can never match, and it's not something I can ever forget about. But it's just so much there that it's just hard to. It's something you never forget. It's always going to be with me. Period.
Yeah. Wow. I gotta say, Rock, I'm speechless. It takes a lot to make me speechless, but man, those are some amazing stories. Um, I am gonna do like two, maybe three more questions. You guys, if you're still with me for like two or three more questions. So, well, so you talk about where you're from in New York. I mean, people don't. Some people are like, oh, New York. You mean Brooklyn? Like, no, there's New York State, there's New York City, but I mean, you guys are like, Manowar, Typo Negative, of course, in New York City. You got Manowar, like so many New York bands, Kiss, New York City. Like, talk a little bit about what it means to be an upstate New York band. And of course, New York City is the center of the universe, so there's a
Yeah.
connection there. But
Well, we where I live, or where Ronnie and I lived, and actually Joey lives only probably a 40-minute, not even a 40-minute drive from here in a town called Auburn. We've been great friends for a long time. And but at that period in time, there were a lot of great like little local bands that played bars. For some reason there was like 6 or 8 bands that were really good that were playing around, and we're figuring like, wow, Cortland, New York, little town in upstate New York, all these great musicians. None of them really made it where there were record deals and sold albums and all that, but they were great musicians. And except for Joey's had a lot of success. But it was like at that time we played clubs, which were 4 sets a night. So originally, I'm getting off track now because I kind of like forgot what your original question was. What was
I was
that?
just talk about, yeah, you're on track. It was about
Oh,
the New York, being a New York
oh,
State band.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and the thing is, later on when we got to be out of state, if I was in Mexico, or if I was in somewhere else, and it's like, where are you from? I'm from New York. You're from New York and you don't speak Spanish? I mean, it's like, it's like, come on, how can that possibly be? Because there's just so many, Spanish people that live in New York City. But when you say you're from New York, they automatically think you're from New York City, rather than, I said, nah, we're 2.5 hour drive from New York, but, we knew, we knew the Twisted Sister guys, Dee Snider, and all those, and we would play in New York City. In fact, one of the big places we used to play back in the Ronnie days were this place called The Scene, which was in New York City, right in Manhattan. And it was a very, not too big of a club, but it was underground. And all the big names that came through the city played in this club. And, we got to play there, so it was a very cool place. But yeah, we got to know a lot of the New York City guys, but they were definitely different than the upstate musicians.
Remember, I warned you the dog. I'm gonna let the dog out for a second. Hang on. Actually, we'll keep this in. This is good. This is real life stuff. I gotta move the dog out. But actually, let me let me ask this serious question. This is the question I ask on every episode of the show. So, and it's a little bit of a departure. So sorry for the whiplash here.
That's
Life can be a little rough, especially as a musician. And a lot of what we do is just trying to help musicians kind of survive and make it and kind of keep going. So, what is your advice for anyone, especially a musician, but anyone on the earth who's kind of going through a dark time, through a rough time, maybe thinking about giving up? What's your advice for people to kind of keep going? I'm gonna step away for a sec, but please go ahead.
Well, I think the main thing is that you have to kind of like persevere, and it's easier said than done, because just because you persevere and you stay with it, it doesn't really mean, it's not a guarantee that you're going to be a success or you're going to be a success at it. But if it's something that you love to do, that's what you should be doing, if it's possible. There's so many variables because all of a sudden, I gotta make money. I gotta pay rent, I gotta buy food, I gotta have a car, I gotta have a phone, I gotta have this, so you need to like almost pursue your passion. And at the same time, I mean, you've heard 100 stories of actors, musicians that pursue their career here, but over here they're flipping burgers, or they're waiting tables, or they're doing some other job to make money to pay for what they really want to do. So my advice is like stay with what you want to do because it only takes one, time, one in the music world. I mean, a lot of times we make fun and we say one hit wonders, but all it takes is one song, to get out there and all of a sudden things explode for you or if you're an actor, all it takes is one shot at a movie, that you become in and all of a sudden the things open up. So you have to persevere. You have to try to make the best of it. But on the other hand, you have to make a living, and it's not like you need a second, choice, but you do have to do something to make money to survive because there's not always money in being a musician, and it's even because I've gone through a lot of years, like it's harder today to make money being a musician than it was 20, 30 years ago, because you could go to a club, we played 5 nights a week in bars, and we got paid. It wasn't a lot of money, but we got paid. Back then, you could afford to live. Nowadays, it seems like there's less places, and I'm just talking locally because I can see what goes on here locally with the musicians. There's no places to play unless you want to play some winery or a brewery that's going to run you from 7 to 9, and pay you like $200. There's no places for bands to develop, into something, whereas we had that opportunity because things were different then, But I guess long story short, persevere. If you believe in yourself and you believe you have something special and it's something that you love to do and it's your passion, you got to stick with it. You got to stick with it and do the best you can and try to make a living at the same time doing something else if you have to, because there's always sacrifices that have to be made no matter what. There's going to be a sacrifice. Whether that helps anybody or not, I hope it does, but that's basically it. My take.
That's absolutely perfect. So yeah, thanks so much, Rock. I don't know if you don't mind me calling you Rock, by the way. I don't know if I should call you Steve.
Yeah, everybody that knows me in the music business calls me Rock.
Yeah,
that's another story. I haven't taken too much of your time, but
I'm good.
I never really. Ronnie was the one that gave me that nickname. Yeah, to be honest with you, there was, my last name is Feinstein, but I'm actually 3/4 Italian. I have Graziano, Fabrizio, and a bunch of Italian names that they're all related in my family with grandparents and all the whole deal. I ended up with a different name, and that's another whole long story for that. But there was a famous boxer with the last name Graziano, and so when we used to fool around, and Ronnie knew that that one of actually my father's name was Graziano, and I never met him. My father grew up in the Bronx, and I never met that grandfather, and that family split up, way when my father was a boy. But Ronnie used to kid me about the fact that I was Graziano, and there was a boxer called Rocky Graziano, so he started calling me Rock, and it kind of just stuck. It kind of stuck with me. Hey Rock, hey Rock, hey Rock. So everybody was calling me Rock, and if I got introduced to somebody, oh, this is David Rock Feinstein, kind of thing. So, and it just stuck all those years. But it was Ronnie that gave me that nickname, and I'm proud to have it, you know. I'm more proud to have it because he gave it to me than I just thought, like, hey, it would be cool to have a nickname, you know, a middle name of Rock, you know. But anyway, I didn't pick it, but I'm stuck, not really stuck with it. I'm happy to have it, but that's how it came about.
Wow, that's an awesome story. Yeah, if Dio gave me a nickname, yeah, I'd stick with it. Maybe if it wasn't like Dickhead or something. But yeah, if it's something cool like Rock, yeah, I'll take it if it's from Ronnie Dio. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And you know, just not that anybody cares, but by the way, we got Bronx Irish in my
Uh-huh.
family. So yeah, I got roots back in the Bronx too. So not that anybody cares about that. But yeah, that's cool. All right, all right. I can't let you go really. I got one more thing. I guess I got a million more questions. I'm going to ask one more, then I'll let everybody get on with their lives. But I think we got to touch on the fact, you know, that you got Carl in the band, who's got this incredible career outside of the rods and being a drummer. I mean, he's produced some of my favorite metal and albums of all time. And you know,
Mhm.
that's got to help for you guys, you know, getting together, like his expertise at that. And again, what a legacy he has, even just as a producer. Like it's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, Carl is of course I've known Carl for many years now, so um Carl is a really talented guy, I mean, not aside from being a great drummer, he's a talented guy, and he's always been interested in the engineering part, the producing part, and back when there was a fellow named his name was Johnny Z. I don't know if you remember him or not.
Oh
He
yeah.
was he was actually Metallica's first manager. And
Right.
but anyways, Carl had the opportunity, to produce some of these bands, and I don't think he was getting paid. If he was getting paid, it wasn't very much. It was because he was wanted to do it, and he was interested in do it, and he's really good at it, He can really hear things that sometimes I know he hears things that I can't hear because my hearing is not that great anymore after so many years of loud. But um, yeah, he's a talented guy. I enjoy playing with him all these years. And the thing is, because I started as a drummer, I was a drummer in a rock band before I joined Ronnie's band. And well, actually, when I was 7, I played trumpet only because Ronnie played trumpet. And um, when I wanted to start a rock band when I was 12 or 13 years old ago, my friend at the time, was played guitar. I said, I play trumpet, that's not going to make it in a rock band. So I got to play something else. But I took up playing the drums, and my parents rented a set of drums, and then eventually we bought a set. So I became a drummer. And I remember that I sat in with Ronnie's band back in the day. So Ronnie knew I was a drummer, and he knew I could play drums. And when Ronnie's band was playing downtown at one of the bars, and like I said back then, it was like 4 sets of cover material, 40 minutes on, 20 minutes off. It was all cover songs. Um, we were talking, and on one of the breaks, and Ronnie goes, of course, my friend at the time was the guitar player, so I used to hang out, and he'd show me how to play some chords. So Ronnie said, hey, Rock, or he didn't call me Rock then because it was before the fact, but he said, you know how to play guitar, don't you? And I said, yeah, I can play guitar. Why? He goes, well, Dick, our rhythm guitar player, is leaving. And he said, if you want to join want to come in as the rhythm guitar player, because they had another guitar player. If you want to come in as a rhythm guitar player, I'd love to have you. I said, great, I'm in. I knew 3 chords on the guitar. I knew 3 chords on the guitar, and that was it. When I joined Ronnie's band, I knew 3 chords. So Dick, the rhythm guitar player, and at that time, 4 sets of cover material. You're talking about a lot of songs, by a lot of groups. Dick stayed on for I don't know, a couple, 2 or 3 months, and taught me, how to play the chords in the song. I didn't have to play any leads. I got to a point where I could play a half a set, a whole set, 2 sets. When I could play all 4 sets, with the band, then Dick left and I was the rhythm guitar player. And that's how I started, playing guitar. And then, of course, after the accident, I became the only guitar player, and it's saying, holy shit, we're learning a song and there's a lead in the song. Well, who's going to play the lead? I got to learn to play that lead, you know? And that's how I just learned by listening to the record and did the best I could to copy the lead. But the people that were my inspiration were the people like Jeff Beck, you know, Richie Blackmore, Jimi Hendrix, all those guys that were at that period of time that were like basically blues based. You know, there wasn't a scale being played at all during that time. You know, so, you know, that's how I happened to just pick up my style of playing. But anyways, again, I'm just rattling on. So that's how it all started for me in the guitar.
Yeah, that's great stuff, man. Rock, you're a class act, Rock. So why don't you take us out? Let's. So I want to say thank you so much for talking to me today and talking to us about the new album and all of this great stuff. Why don't you take us out? Tell people what to look forward to for the Rods and for yourself in the rest of 2025 and 2026 and beyond. Like what can people look forward to in the future?
First of all, I'm so happy to be here to, you know, to tell you about all these things. Like I said before, I mean, there's a lot to tell, and especially for people that want to hear all these things. You know, it's easy for me to talk. As far as the future goes, I mean, the Rods, you know, we're chomping at the bit to be able to play out live again. We're very excited about the release of this album because we've got so much, there's been so much time and so much like, it's coming out now. Oh, then it's coming out now. Oh, then it's coming out now. There's been so much anticipation. We're excited about the album, and we're excited about the fact that there's some different stuff on it, you know, that the Rods wouldn't normally do from the older albums. And we're looking forward to hopefully playing some live shows, you know. That's the whole thing. Like I mentioned before, playing live shows is what it's all about, you know. It's the people, the fans that want to hear the band play, and it's the songs that inspire everybody, make them feel good, and that's what we're looking forward to in 2026.
All right, great. David Rock Feinstein from the Rods, everyone. Thanks so much. Thanks again, David. It's great talking to you today.
Happy to be here. Thank you.